Cade stared down at the beetle's corpse, his grip tightening slightly around the shaft of the wooden spear. The image of that translucent wisp lingered in his mind. It hadn't felt like the essence he absorbed from the ash. It hadn't felt like anything at all. Experience. His brow furrowed. The system had given him the same notification it always did after a kill. But now, for the first time, he had seen what happened. Or at least part of it. The beetle was still full of life essence. Even now, he could see its thick strands of green slowly fading as they leaked into the air. But something had been taken the moment it died. Cade exhaled slowly as his thoughts aligned. The system is taking a portion of the essence. It siphoned it off the moment a creature died, stripped away whatever made it life essence, and forced it into him as experience. He frowned. It fit what he had seen so far, but he still wasn't sure what experience even was. "I'll need more data," he murmured. "More kills to make more comparisons. More chances to observe the difference between what the system took and what remained in the corpse." His gaze flicked back to the beetle. The lingering essence within it continued to thin, slowly dissipating back into the environment. He couldn't stand here thinking and hypothesizing forever. Cade shifted his grip on the spear, then bent down and grabbed one of the beetle's tree branch-like antlers. The corpse dragged heavily against the ground as he began pulling it back through the swamp. "I need get this back to Vorduin before it all leaks out," he muttered. The jungle didn't feel the same on the return trip. Where before it had been alive and vibrant, now it began to feel desolate. As Cade dragged the beetle through the undergrowth, he began to notice signs of the ashen front again. Smaller tortoises moved through the trees ahead of him, their forms slower, less imposing than Vorduin's. White flames flickered unevenly from their jaws as they burned through thick clusters of vegetation. Large plants collapsed into smoldering ash beneath their efforts. With his new sight, Cade could see the difference immediately. Their flames worked but not cleanly. Strands of green essence broke apart unevenly, some condensing into pale ash while others scattered and faded into the air, lost before they could be claimed. One of the young tortoises had cornered a massive insect near a pool of stagnant water. It crushed the creature beneath its weight before burning the corpse. The resulting cloud of essence was uneven, part of it condensed, part of it dissipated into nothingness. Cade adjusted his grip and kept moving. Further along, the jungle shifted again. The next group of tortoises moved with more precision. Their flames burned hotter, cleaner. The plants they consumed left behind less scattered essence, more of it condensing into pure essence held stable in the ash. Still not perfect like Vorduin's demonstration. Cade glanced around as he dragged the beetle through the thinning jungle. Brahm was nowhere to be seen, even though this should have been the prodigy of Ash's cohort. He huffed quietly. "Yeah, it's probably for the best if we don't run into each other out here." Cade wasn't convinced Brahm had let go of the grudge from their fight. He wouldn't have put it past the brazen young tortoise to look for a chance to avenge his loss. Eventually, the dense vegetation gave way to a more barren landscape. The swamp floor was coated in pale ash, broken only by scattered patches of stubborn plant life that had yet to be consumed. Up ahead sat Vorduin. The massive tortoise rested in stillness, surrounded by the remnants of what the younger tortoises had left behind. Vorduin's eyes opened the moment Cade stepped into the ashen clearing. The ancient tortoise did not move at first. His ember-lit gaze swept over Cade, then shifted to the corpse dragging behind him. "You've returned," Vorduin said calmly. His gaze lingered briefly on the weapon in Cade's hand before returning to his face. "It seems you are beginning to understand the Great Tree's gift." Cade glanced down at the wooden spear, his grip tightening slightly. "Yeah, maybe," he said. "It has its uses." His expression shifted, faint unease creeping in. "But I'm still not exactly comfortable with something growing inside of me. Discomfort and pain are often the price one pays for power." Cade dropped the beetle's body with a thud against the ash-coated ground. He rolled his shoulders slightly, stretching his muscles after dragging it this far. Vorduin studied the corpse in silence for a moment before giving a small nod. "This will suffice," he said. "Though you should have returned sooner. A portion of its essence has already been lost." Vorduin's gaze shifted back to him, lingering with sharper scrutiny. "And yet," the Duke said, "I sense that you have absorbed more essence since you left. You did not return to me for that, and you do not yet possess our flame." He paused. "So tell me. How did you absorb a portion of the beetle's essence?" Cade exhaled slowly. "Honestly? I'm not completely sure. When I killed it," he said, gesturing toward the beetle, "I saw part of its essence separate from the rest. His brow furrowed. It didn't behave like the other essence I've seen. It lost its color and became almost invisible. Vorduin remained still. Then it drifted into me, Cade continued. But it didn't feel like the essence from the ash. There was no warmth. No real sensation at all. A brief silence followed as he thought it through. So my working hypothesis is that the system intercepted part of the beetle's essence, he said. It siphoned that portion away the moment the beetle died, altered it somehow, and then transferred it to me. He glanced at Vorduin. Whenever I kill something or even help kill it, the system grants me experience. Based on what I saw, I think experience might just be essence that the system has processed into a different form. Vorduin lowered his head slightly, studying both Cade and the corpse again. I have never heard of the record performing such a function, he said after a moment. Cade blinked, waiting for him to explain. When no further elaboration came, he was about to ask. You should be wary of this system, Vorduin continued. What you describe is imprecise. Cade frowned. What do you mean? Vorduin shifted slightly, the ash beneath him stirring. To cultivate essence is to act with intent, he said. When we take essence into ourselves, we command it. Shape it. Direct it toward purpose. We decide what it becomes. This system of yours appears to do no such thing. Cade's eyes narrowed slightly as he considered the old tortoise's words. Yet, he said slowly. He crossed his arms, thinking. When I level up, I don't choose anything, he added. All of my stats just increase. Strength, endurance, vitality, all of them go up. His expression tightened. So it probably just stores the essence in some nebulous space. Or spreads it out evenly until there's enough to boost every stat at once. Vorduin gave a low hum. A crude method, he said. Cade huffed faintly. Yeah, well. It's what I've got for now. Silence settled between them for a moment. Then Vorduin shifted his weight slightly. What is done, the Duke said. You cannot reclaim what has already been lost. We move forward. Cade nodded. Works for me, he said. I've done enough guessing for now. Good. Vorduin turned his full attention to the beetle's corpse. Now, watch. Cade glanced down at the spear in his hand, then planted it in the ashen ground beside him. The wooden shaft sank in with a dull crunch, standing upright within arm's reach. Then he looked back to Vorduin, his focus sharpening. Through his essence sight, he saw Vorduin's core flare. Brilliant white light pulsed outward, flooding into the network of channels running through his body. The energy surged upward, gathering in his throat and jaws. White flames began to flicker into existence. A moment later they erupted, engulfing the beetle's corpse entirely. His flames devoured it with ruthless efficiency, breaking it down in seconds. Flesh, chitin, and lingering life essence collapsed inward, reduced to a dense cloud of white ash. Cade's eyes widened slightly. The cloud in front of him was thicker, brighter, and far more than anything the plants had produced. Vorduin cut off his breath, the flames dying as quickly as they had come. Cade instinctively stepped forward. Then froze as Vorduin's voice cut through the moment. Stop! Vorduin's gaze shifted to him. This time, you will not simply consume it, the Duke continued. When the essence enters you, hold it within your channels. Cade frowned slightly. Okay. Feel where it begins, Vorduin said. And where it travels. His voice remained calm and steady. And do not allow it to disperse into your body. Cade glanced at the dense cloud of essence, then back to Vorduin. He nodded once, then took a slow breath and activated hyper-focused meditation for the first time since his fight with Brahm. The shift was immediate. His perception surged forward, stretching each moment into something longer, sharper, and more defined. The drifting ash, the faint currents of essence in the air, even the subtle pulse of Vorduin's presence, all of it became clearer. Cade stepped forward and lowered himself toward the dense cloud of white essence. Then he inhaled. The moment it entered his mouth, he felt it. The essence dissolved against his tongue and spread inward as a flowing current. There was too much to draw in all at once, but he pulled in what he could. Most of the dense white cloud remained behind, swirling in place before him. The essence he managed to inhale slipped past his throat and into his body, no longer an abstract sensation of vague warmth. Cade closed his eyes and turned all of his focus inward. He followed the essence as it flowed through him. The warmth pulsed upward first, brushing against his skull, spreading through his head in a faint, tingling wave before flowing back down. It traced along his neck, then spilled outward into his shoulders and chest. From there, it spread everywhere. Through every muscle, every bone, and every nerve. It followed paths that felt familiar. The same channels carved open during the Ashen baptism and reforged by the lightning of the storm sap crucible. Cade's breath hitched slightly as he felt it cycle through his heart, then surge upward into his mind again before cascading back down in a continuous loop. Feel it, Vorduin's gravelly voice cut through his concentration. Do not let it pass unnoticed. Cade focused harder. He tracked every motion. Every pulse. Every shift. And then he noticed something. The flow wasn't stable. Small fragments of the essence peeled away from the current as it moved, dissolving into his body. Seeping into his tissues. Part of it is dissipating into me. Good, Vorduin said. Now stop it. Cade's brow furrowed. How? Will, Vorduin said simply. The word carried weight. Do not allow it to scatter. Hold it. Cade kept his focus inward, tracing the movement of the essence through his body. In his mind's eye, the warmth had shifted into motion. A current flowing through defined pathways. Cade reached out with his will and clamped down on it. The reaction was immediate. The smooth current bucked violently. The flow twisted, turning turbulent as the essence resisted his grip. Pain flared along his channels, sharp and sudden. Cade hissed under his breath. Some of the essence slipped free, scattering into his body before he could stop it. The flow destabilized, uneven and erratic. He released his grip slightly, breathing hard. That wasn't it. Do not let it disperse, Vorduin said again, his voice calm and steady. Cade frowned. Yeah, I got that part. But how the hell am I supposed to do that? His thoughts raced, searching for anything that made sense. Then, unexpectedly, a memory surfaced from the deep recesses of his mind. Flow through a confined space, boundary behavior, the no-slip condition from his fluid mechanics course ages ago. In his mind's eye, the channels within his body shifted. The essence was no longer just energy, it became a viscous fluid. Flowing through narrow pathways like liquid through pipes. He imagined it slowing at the edges, a thin layer adhering to the walls of his channels and remaining stationary. Cade's will moved again, but this time it was careful. Instead of clamping down on the entire flow, he focused on the outermost layer, the thin film of essence brushing against the walls of his channels. He held that. Anchored it in place while allowing the rest of the current to continue to move. As it flowed, more essence brushed against the channel walls and joined the layer. A thin coating began to form, clinging to the pathways throughout his body. Cade's breathing steadied as he maintained control, his focus stretched tight. The circulating essence continued its cycle, but now, it left something behind as it passed. A film. Thin and stable. He felt the difference almost immediately. The flow smoothed out. Where the channels were coated, the current seemed to move faster, more efficiently, like friction had lessened. But it came at a cost. Cade could feel the total volume of circulating essence shrinking. Part of it was being held in place, bound to the channel walls under his will. His mind strained under the effort. Holding that layer across every channel in his body demanded constant attention. Constant control. But the leaking had stopped. Cade exhaled slowly, maintaining the structure. Well done, Vorduin said. Cade barely registered the praise. His attention remained turned inward, stretched taut as he focused on the essence moving through his channels. Again, Vorduin instructed. The word reached Cade only faintly through the haze of concentration. Breathe in again, Vorduin repeated. Cade frowned slightly but didn't have the capacity to argue. He did as instructed and inhaled deeply once more. A second wave of essence surged into him. He had no capacity to question where it came from as he felt it merge with the first current, increasing the volume and adding to the pressure he felt within. The flow thickened, filling more of the channels carved within him. The warmth intensified, but Cade held it together and forced the essence to keep moving. His breathing steadied as he adjusted, maintaining control as the growing current pressed outward against the boundaries of his channels. Again, Vorduin commanded. Cade hesitated for half a second, then inhaled again. The third intake hit harder. The incoming essence was denser, and the moment it entered him, Cade felt the pressure spike. The warmth sharpened into a burning sensation. His body tensed instinctively as the flow surged through him, pushing against the limits of the pathways inside his body. This is too much, Cade thought. No, Vorduan's voice cut in sharply, as if the old tortoise had read his thoughts. Hold it! Cade's jaw clenched and he doubled down. He forced the current to move faster in his mind, keeping it circulating so it wouldn't settle, all while straining to maintain the thin boundary layer pressed against the walls of his channels. The pressure built. The burning intensified. It felt like trying to force a flood of maple syrup through channels that were only barely large enough to contain it. Cade sucked in a sharp breath through clenched teeth. Keep it moving. The current roared through him. Every channel strained under the load. Every pathway stretched. But it held. Barely. Cade's entire body felt full, like he had eaten far too much at an all-you-can-eat buffet. It was uncomfortable, but as the cycles continued, the flow stabilized. Good, Vorduan said. Cade didn't respond. He was too focused on not losing control. Now that your channels are full, Vorduan continued calmly, you may begin learning to shape your internal essence. Cade's breathing came in slow, measured pulls as he fought to maintain control. Inside him, the current of essence surged. It pressed against the boundaries of his channels, thick and heavy, threatening to slip free at any moment. The thin layer he had forced against the channel walls trembled under the strain, his will stretched taut as he held it in place. It wanted to disperse, to sink into him, to merge with his very being. Cade clamped his will down, forcing the current to keep moving. Circulating without pause. The pressure built with every cycle. The burning didn't fade. If anything, it deepened, settling into his bones, into the marrow of him, as the essence churned through pathways that felt barely large enough to contain it. Desolation, Vorduan's voice rumbled, calm and steady beside him. Cade could barely turn his attention outward to listen to the old tortoise's words. The white flames of my kind are not merely fire, the Duke continued. They are the embodiment of desolation. Cade struggled to hold the flow together as the words washed over him. Life seeks to grow, Vorduan said. It spreads. It entangles. It multiplies without restraint. The frogs embody this truth. Without desolation, their creations would fill every corner of this realm, choking it with abundance. The current inside Cade wavered for a moment before he regained control. But desolation, Vorduan continued, his tone deepening, is the end of all life. Cade felt the words as much as he heard them. It is emptiness. Stillness. The absence that remains when all has been stripped away. Desolation does not nurture. It does not create. It does not preserve. The current within surged. It reduces. It empties the vessel, Vorduan said. It destroys the attunement of essence until it cannot be broken further. As Vorduan spoke, an image formed in Cade's mind. Ash. Endless, drifting white ash. Our white flames carry this truth, Vorduan continued. What they touch does not simply burn. It is rendered down, stripped away of all that is unnecessary until only the most fundamental essence that makes up reality remains. Cade's focus strained. The current inside him bucked slightly, the boundary layer thinning as his attention split. No, focus. He forced it steady again. To wield such flames, Vorduan said, your will, your intent, and your channels must align with this truth. Cade latched onto the words, attempting to understand what the Duke was saying while maintaining the flow. Your will and your intent are the easiest to shape, the Duke continued. You may choose them. You may direct them. But your channels are not yet aligned. That will change in time, through use and repetition, your channels will reshape themselves to match your intent. Cade's mind flickered back to the storm sap crucible. The carved pathways along the shaft and at its base. The way the sap had been transformed into lightning. This is the same thing. Different outcome but the same principle. He just didn't know how to shape it yet. For now, Vorduan continued, you must rely on your will to overcome the essence. Another wave of pressure surged through him. You must do more than guide the essence, the Duke said. You must impose your intent upon it as it flows. Force it into the embodiment of desolation itself. The current within him trembled. Over time, your channels will learn. They will rearrange. What you struggle to force now will one day occur naturally. The beginning is always the most difficult. Now, the Duke said, as the essence flows through you, picture the ashen wastes. Cade's mind was already there, envisioning the cracked earth, the endless horizons of grey and white. Nothing living had survived. Just heat and silence. The slow drift of ash carried on a dead wind. The land the Ashen Emperor left behind. Cade felt something shift as the heat inside of him sharpened. The burning current within was building, growing stronger. Good, Vorduhan said, a hint of approval threading through his tone. You are on the path. Cade's focus wavered for half a heartbeat as the pressure inside him spiked again. The image. The flow. The boundary layer. All of it demanded his attention at once. The thin film of essence along his channels trembled as his control slipped. No. He forced it back into place, but it wasn't easy. Maintaining the image of desolation. Forcing the current to cycle. Holding the boundary layer in place. It was becoming too much. Cade's mind strained under the weight of it, every ounce of his will stretched thin as he fought to keep everything from collapsing at once. Focus. Vorduhan's voice cut into Cade's mind. Do not try to grasp everything at once, the Duke continued. Narrow your attention. The essence that flows through your chest, follow it. Guide it upward. Through your throat. Into your mouth. Cade swallowed hard, his concentration stretched thin. The burning you feel, Vorduhan said, that is where the path begins. Do not resist it. Do not diffuse it. Seize it. Cade tried, but the heat wasn't confined to a single place. It was everywhere, threaded through every channel, pooled in every limb, surging through him like a tide of fire. How am I supposed to isolate that? Focus on the sensation, Vorduhan pressed. Take that heat and make it sharper. More violent. Let it become destruction. Cade's jaw tightened as he pushed his will inward, trying to gather the feeling, to condense it into something more defined, but his mind was already balancing too much. The flow. The boundary layer. The image of desolation. And now this. The strain built. His thoughts began to blur at the edges. I need more, Cade muttered under his breath. Just a little more. He felt as if he were on an edge. A precipice of something greater. Like something just beyond his grasp, something he almost understood. Just a little further. Something shifted inside of him. A subtle, almost imperceptible pop. And with that pop came sudden clarity. The strain didn't vanish, but it changed. It smoothed and settled into something he could finally work with. He felt the thin layer of essence along his channels hold steady without his direct control, as though his body had begun sustaining it on its own. It was as if he switched from breathing manually to letting his subconscious take over. A ding in his head tried to pull at his attention. A system notification that he dismissed immediately. Even with the boundary layer maintaining itself, he didn't have the mental capacity to read it right now. Good, Vorduhan said, his tone shifting with quiet approval. You have taken your second step. Cade barely heard him. His attention locked inward, riding that clarity, afraid it might vanish if he let it slip for even a moment. Now, Vorduhan continued, draw the essence into your chest. Cade followed the instruction, moved by a set of instincts that felt new and unfamiliar. As the current cycled through him, he reached out with his will and caught a portion of it, holding it back from the rest of the flow instead of letting it continue on through his channels. The moment he did, heat flared. He sucked in a breath as the essence pooled within his chest, pressing against his lungs. Do not allow it to stagnate, Vorduhan said. Force it to move, to rotate. Cade followed the tortoise's words. The trapped essence began to spin, swirling within his chest cavity like a forming vortex. Compress it, Vorduhan instructed. Condense it. Do not allow it to remain diffuse. Cade hesitated for the briefest instant. How could he compress something that already felt like a liquid? Liquids were incompressible, everyone knew that. But this wasn't exactly a normal fluid. Cade focused and pushed. The swirling mass resisted at first, slippery, formless, and unwilling to collapse inward. But with each cycle, Cade fed more essence into it. The pressure built. The rotation tightened. Faster. Denser. Until finally it gave. The swirling pool of hot essence shrank, collapsing inward into something smaller and far more concentrated. He kept feeding it. Cycle after cycle, more essence was siphoned from the circulating flow and forced into the growing whirlpool within his chest. The small bead of compressed essence at the base of the whirlpool pulsed, unstable under the force he was imposing on it. Cade's focus narrowed further. It now took more effort to keep that bead contained than it did to maintain the flow through the rest of his channels. If his concentration slipped even for a moment, it felt like the thing might rupture inside him. Good, Vorduhan said again, his voice steady. Stick to the path. Cade clenched even harder, every ounce of his will locked onto that unstable core. Now, Vorduin continued, you must give it purpose. The bead pulsed again. Imbue it with your will. Impart it with the command of desolation, Vorduin said. With the purpose of destruction. The words settled heavily in his mind and Cade reached again for the image of the ashen wastes. The seemingly endless empty expanse where nothing could grow. Nothing could survive. Only the aftermath of a land that had been stripped down to nothing. Using his will he imparted that image into the compressed sphere of volatile essence. The swirling mass resisted. Do not hesitate, Vorduin said quietly. Force it to obey your will, your command. Force it to embody destruction and spread desolation. Cade drew in a slow breath and locked down his thoughts. This wasn't like the storm sap crucible. Back then, he had guided the lightning that the crucible had produced. He had learned its rhythm and worked with it. This was different. He couldn't guide this. He had to command and dominate it just like he had with the violet lightning. Cade focused inward and clamped down with his will. The sphere of condensed essence in his chest spun violently, heat building with every rotation. It actively resisted him. It pushed back, like something alive, like something that refused to be shaped and molded by an external will. Submit. It was not a request. He needed it to obey him. He needed it to listen to his command. He drove his will in even further, overpowering the swirling sphere of essence. In his mind, the image of the ashen wastes sharpened into a universal truth. All things ended. All growth, no matter how rampant, no matter how overwhelming, would one day be stripped away. Life surged, expanded, consumed, but desolation was inevitable. The final state. The silence after everything had been reduced. The heat death of the universe itself. The breaking down of any and all molecular interactions. Cade seized that concept and pressed it into the sphere. A law of nature that could not be disobeyed. Everything had to come to an end. And in order for it to end, it had to first break apart. The swirling essence bucked violently and for a moment, it felt like it might rupture under the pressure of his will. Then the nature of the essence sphere shifted. The heat deepened past a fire burning, transforming into flames that would break all bonds. The sphere grew denser, tighter, more volatile. The temperature spiked. The pressure climbed. It felt like he was holding a star in his chest. You have reached critical mass, Vorduin rumbled. Cade barely heard him. Now, the Duke continued, release your hold on the cycle. Let the essence in your channels do as it will. Focus only on what you have created. Cade hesitated. Let go? Every instinct screamed at him not to. But he had come this far following Vorduin's advice. There was no point in backing down now. Slowly, cautiously, he released control of the circulating flow. The current continued on its own and his entire focus collapsed inward onto the sphere. He compressed it further. Forced it tighter. Spun it faster. The pressure skyrocketed and the heat became nearly unbearable. And still he pushed. Now, Vorduin said, voice steady, push it upward. From your chest. Through your throat. Into your mouth. Cade obeyed, but the moment he pushed against the sphere, it resisted again. It felt immovable. Like trying to lift something impossibly dense. Like trying to push a mountain with his bare hands. Move, he thought. The sphere trembled under the weight of his command, then shifted. Cade seized the moment and drove it upward. The sphere dragged through his channels, inch by inch, scraping against a pathway that felt far too small to contain it. The burning followed and intensified. It felt like he had swallowed a ball of fire and was now forcing it back up through his own throat. He held his breath as it reached his neck. Pain flared, but he ignored it and pushed the sphere higher until it emerged into his mouth. Cade's entire body tensed. The heat exploded outward across his tongue, his cheeks, the roof of his mouth. It was worse than anything he'd ever felt. Worse than the lightning ravaging his body. Worse than being stripped bare by the ashen baptism. His flesh felt like it was being scorched from the inside out, torn apart by the heat and violent desolation from the sphere now lodged in his mouth. Hold it, Vorduin instructed. Cade's eyes squeezed shut even harder than before. Hold it. Every instinct screamed at him to release it. To get it out. But he didn't. He held it in place. Locking it down with the sheer force of his will, enduring the torment. Feel your channels, Vorduin continued. Observe them. Through the pain, Cade forced his awareness to his channels. He felt the subtle but undeniable movement of the channels in his throat and mouth. They were shifting ever so slightly as they adjusted, reorienting themselves to accommodate the new sensation. He could sense his pathways were being carved wider, smoother, better suited to what they were now carrying. Cade's body shook from the exertion. Now, Vorduhan said, his voice carrying a final weight of command, impose your will one last time. Impart one final act of desolation into the essence. Cade focused everything he had left. The command of destruction, the concept of leaving only desolation in its wake. He didn't just visualize the ashen wastes. He felt them. Felt what it meant to be stripped away. To be broken down so completely that nothing recognizable was left. Only the most fundamental remnants of existence would remain. He forced that into the sphere. Commanded it to become that truth. The sphere pulsed but quickly stabilized under the weight of Cade's will. Now, Vorduhan said. Open your mouth and breathe desolation out into the world. Cade's eyes snapped open as he opened his mouth and exhaled. His vision exploded as blinding white fire tore from his mouth in a roaring torrent. It was not a wavering flame or a sputtering burst, but a relentless stream of white-hot destruction that surged forward with absolute purpose. At some point, a tree had been placed in front of him. Cade had no idea when or how, but at the moment, he didn't care. The flames struck the trunk, and where they touched, the tree began to disappear. It did not burn or char. It disappeared as if it were being erased from existence itself. The trunk collapsed inward, unraveling as if the very idea of tree was being stripped from it. Structure failed all at once. The outer layers easily gave way to the white flames until the whole thing seemed to come apart. Cade's eyes widened as he watched. His flames claimed the tree's structure, its life, its very essence, and broke it down into something more fundamental. The white fire enveloped the trunk in a single breath, sank into it, and tore through it from within. Wood disintegrated. Fibers came apart. Form dissolved into ruin. Another system notification chimed in the back of his mind, but he ignored it for now. Instead, he held on to the feeling. The power. The control. The terrible finality of what he had just birthed into the world. The stream of white fire poured from him without pause. He felt it leaving his body, felt the channels in his throat and mouth working in tandem with his will, shaping and sustaining the output as if they had always been meant for this. This was his doing. He had killed the beetle, taken its essence, and forced it to submit to his will. He had turned it into desolation, and the tree in front of him never stood a chance. Within seconds, it was gone. All that remained was a drifting cloud of soft white ash hanging in the air where it had once stood. As the flames finally died from his lips, his breath came back ragged. The only sound left was his own harsh breathing and the pounding of blood in his ears. Cade stared at the cloud of ash, chest heaving, heart hammering as the last traces of heat faded from his mouth. He had done it. Weeks into the tutorial, or however long it has been, after everything the system and this corrupted dungeon had thrown at him, he had finally cast real magic. Nice. Vorduhan said as he bellowed out a loud, boisterous laugh. The sound rolled deep and heavy through the ashen clearing, a rumbling echo that carried both surprise and approval. Ember-lit eyes fixed on Cade, bright with interest. Well done, the Duke said, voice thick with satisfaction. Your first true breath. Cade exhaled slowly, still feeling the lingering heat in his throat and chest from the flame he had just expelled. His body ached, his channels still burned faintly from the strain. He winced slightly as a dull pressure settled behind his eyes. The clarity that had carried him through the process lingered, but now it felt stretched thin. With a mental command, he released the hyper-focused meditation skill. The world softened immediately, the edge of his thoughts dulling as the increasingly familiar headache assaulted his mind. Vorduhan continued, those flames were among the purest I have ever seen from a hatchling. His gaze sharpened. Even Brahm did not achieve such refinement in his first attempt. Cade hesitated, then glanced off to the side, brow furrowing slightly. That tree, where did it even come from? He asked. The spear you planted, the Duke said. It carried both the great tree's essence and your own. Given ground, it took root. You did well in destroying your own creation. Now, do not idle, Vorduhan added, nodding toward the drifting cloud of essence in front of Cade. Finish the breath. The essence will disperse if you delay. Cade's attention snapped back to the cloud. It hovered in front of him, soft, white, and deceptively calm. But in his essence sight, it pulsed with density. With potential. To reclaim it, Vorduhan said, will it to condense and breathe in. Cade hesitated for only a moment before reaching out with his will. The connection came instantly. It was faint and ethereal but unmistakable. The cloud responded immediately. Cade felt it like a thread linking him to the essence he had just liberated from the tree. He focused his mind on the cloud, willing it to condense. The drifting cloud tightened subtly, drawing inward as the loose edges pulled together. Then, without breaking that connection, Cade inhaled. The essence flowed toward him. It slipped into his mouth effortlessly, dissolving the moment it crossed his lips. Gentle warmth spread through him. Not the overwhelming flood from before, but something smoother, more controlled. It moved through his channels, brushing against the strained pathways left behind by his earlier effort. Cade exhaled slowly, eyes closing once more as he focused inward. He felt the essence merge with what remained inside him, reinforcing the flow rather than overwhelming it. Good, Vorduin said. Now cycle it. Cade obeyed, guiding the current through his channels. The movement came easier this time. Smoother. More natural than when he focused on it before. Vorduin continued, you now possess a method to gather essence for yourself. It will take more than one success for the record to recognize the skill, but with practice it will come. Cade kept his focus inward as he listened to the old tortoise's words. Essence, Vorduin said, is not bound to a single purpose. It may take countless forms. What you created, the flames of desolation, are but one path. Cade felt the current loop through him again. It didn't strain the same way it had before. You may refine essence into life and use it to mend your body, Vorduin continued. You may force it into your flesh to sustain movement beyond your limits. Or you may shape it to strengthen yourself permanently. Cade's brow furrowed slightly as he listened while observing the flow within him. Why is it so much easier now? He questioned. The latter, Vorduin added, is the path most of my kind follow. Once a core is formed, essence is refined and integrated to strengthen the body over time. Cade tracked the current again. It flowed cleanly through his channels, guided by his will but without the same resistance as before. Is it because there's less of it? That made sense. His channels weren't being pushed to their limits anymore. There was no pressure threatening to tear them apart from the inside. Vorduin's voice cut through his thoughts. For now, we keep things simple. Maintain the cycle, the Duke said. Continue until it persists without effort. Cade cracked his eyes open just enough to give the Duke a faint nod before turning his attention fully inward once more. The current of essence moved through him steady, controlled, looping through the pathways carved into his body by the ash. It didn't fight him. It didn't strain against his will. It simply flowed. Cade opened his eyes and looked up at Vorduin. It's already moving on its own, he said. I'm not really doing anything and it seems to be cycling through my body perfectly fine. Vorduin stilled. For a brief moment, the ancient tortoise simply watched him. Then, slowly, a low chuckle rumbled from deep within his chest. I see, Vorduin said, amusement threading through his voice. Then it would seem you possess a natural aptitude for essence manipulation. Cade frowned. That doesn't make sense, he muttered. He had never done anything like this before. Everything he knew about essence had been forced on him over the past, what? Days? Weeks? Time inside the dungeon had blurred together so he wasn't really sure how long it had been. So why did it feel like his body already understood what to do? Cade's eyes unfocused slightly as he turned inward again, not toward the flow of essence this time, but toward something else. The two notifications he had received from the system. He hadn't had the chance to properly read them before, so he pulled them up. Ding! You have gained the essence manipulation skill. Essence manipulation, rare, you have gained the ability to directly interact with essence. Enables intake, circulation, and output of essence through the body's channels. Allows essence to be shaped for internal enhancement and external effects. Passive circulation through channels has been established. A stable boundary layer of essence now lines your channels, significantly reducing dissipation and increasing flow efficiency. Well, that explained part of it. He had gained a rare skill from the system. That was probably what made the cycle so much easier to maintain. Cade's gaze lingered on the final line of the description. A stable boundary layer of essence now lines your channels. So the system had recognized what he had done and responded in the form of granting him a skill. Was that normal? Vorduin had just said it would take multiple attempts to form a skill involving the white flames of desolation, but essence manipulation had come so easily. The essence was no longer moving through his channels by his conscious command. The thin layer he had anchored to his channel's walls had changed the nature of the flow itself, turning a desperate act of control into something stable and efficient. Cade exhaled slowly, his thoughts already chasing the implications. Still, that doesn't explain why it came so easily. Well, relatively easily. He had nearly burned himself out while controlling the essence within himself. Nearly lost control more than once. But compared to everything else he'd survived since being dumped into this corrupted dungeon, it wasn't even close to the most dangerous thing he'd done. Was it because of Vorduhan? Because he had a teacher guiding him through it? Or was it the environment? The danger? The fact that he was working with something as fundamentally destructive as desolation? Cade's gaze flicked briefly toward the Duke. Maybe it was a combination of factors. He shook his head slightly. Asking why he got the skill didn't matter right now. There was still one more notification. Cade pulled it up. Ding! Congratulations! You have developed a new law seed. Law seed, dissolution created. Principle established, all things may be broken down. Plus 10 intelligence. Plus 10 wisdom. Cade went still. Another one? His eyes lingered on the word, dissolution. The name alone felt like it carried weight. Not as heavy as inviolable self but different. Broader. More expansive. His thoughts turned inward again, replaying what had just happened. He had been cycling essence. Listening to Vorduhan. Watching the process of breaking something down, reducing it to its base form of pure essence. And for a moment it had all clicked. Not just intellectually either. But it had felt like he brushed against something larger than himself. A truth that existed whether he understood it or not. Is that how law seeds are formed? His gaze drifted to the stat increases. Plus 10 intelligence. Plus 10 wisdom. If dissolution was about breaking things down, reducing them to their base components, then he needed to understand what those components were. Their structure, their composition, the underlying framework of how it was made up. That explained intelligence. But why wisdom? Just because something can be broken down, doesn't mean it should be. Knowing when to break something and when not to. I guess that fits. Good enough for now at least. Cade exhaled slowly, the weight of the realization settling in. He now had 2 law seeds. 2. And he didn't even know what the hell they were. Sure, he had his own hypotheses, but he didn't know if he was correct. He glanced up at Vorduhan again, a mix of curiosity and unease flickering through his expression. Something told him this wasn't normal. Especially for someone without a core. Vorduhan waited patiently. The ancient tortoise did not press him. He simply watched, ember-lit eyes steady as Cade stood there, clearly lost in thought. After a few moments, Cade exhaled and looked up. I got a couple of notifications, he said. Vorduhan inclined his head slightly. Speak. The system gave me a skill, he began. It's called essence manipulation. At that, a faint smile touched the edges of Vorduhan's mouth. Your system did not give you that, the Duke said. Cade blinked. What? You earned it, Vorduhan continued calmly. You shaped it yourself. Cade frowned. How would you know that? You don't even know what the system is. Vorduhan's gaze remained steady. I may not know your system, he said, but I know the record. Cade stilled slightly. The record, Vorduhan continued, is the reflection of one's path. It does not grant power. It does not decide your growth. It merely records what you have already achieved. Cade's brow furrowed. When understanding reaches a certain threshold, Vorduhan said, the record acknowledges. That is why it will take multiple successful attempts to form the skill based upon the flames of desolation. His eyes flicked briefly toward Cade. The skill you call essence manipulation is not unique to your system. It is a fundamental step along our path. Cade hesitated. So, you have it too. Vorduhan gave a slow nod. I do. Cade's thoughts churned. So the system isn't giving me skills, this record, or whatever, is just recording down my accomplishments? That actually made some sense. The system did say that there would be limited system access while in Cynthia's legacy, so why would it be giving him skills? What about the boundary layer? Vorduhan's expression shifted ever so slightly. What boundary layer? Cade paused, then gestured vaguely toward himself. The thing I did inside my channels, he said. I slowed the flow at the edges. created a thin layer that sticks to the walls so the rest of the essence moves smoother. I based it on something called the no-slip condition from fluid dynamics. Vorduhan said nothing at first. He simply watched Cade, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, the Duke shook his head. That is not part of my skill, he said. Cade blinked. What? My record does not describe such a function, Vorduhan continued. Nor do I manipulate essence in that manner. Cade's frown deepened. But it works, he said. It made everything both easier and much more stable. I do not doubt that, Vorduhan replied while shifting slightly, the ash beneath him stirring as his massive form adjusted. But understand this, his gaze fixed on Cade, sharper now, more intent in each word he spoke. The record is personal. It reflects your path, your understanding, and your experiences. His voice remained calm, but there was weight behind it. Two individuals may walk the same path. They may learn the same concepts. Even follow the same teachings. But record will never be identical. Cade listened carefully. Your method, Vorduhan continued, is your own. Born from your perspective. Your past and your way of interpreting the world. His eyes narrowed slightly. And because of that, it may lead you somewhere different. Cade absorbed that in silence. It made sense. Even if someone explained the same concept to two different people, they wouldn't internalize it the same way. So if the record reflected that difference, then, what does that make the system? Cade's thoughts turned inward again. If the record was just a reflection of what's happened, then the system had to be something more. It gave quests and rewards. It implanted cores in people and gave them classes and professions. Maybe it was built on top of the record. Or mimicked it. Or, something else entirely. Cade exhaled slowly. That was a problem for later. He looked back up at Vorduhan. There was something else, he said. Vorduhan gestured slightly. Continue. Cade hesitated for only a moment. I got another notification, he said. A law seed. Vorduhan stilled. Another, the Duke repeated quietly. Cade nodded. Yet. What is it called? Dissolution. For the first time since Cade had met him, Vorduhan's composure cracked from something besides amusement. His eyes widened and his jaw dropped ever so slightly. Dissolution, he murmured to cover the momentary lapse in composure. A long pause followed. 2 law seeds, Vorduhan said under his breath. At this stage. He trailed off, something unreadable passing through his expression. Cade waited but Vorduhan seemed set on remaining silent. I know you said we'd talk about law seeds later, Cade said, but, maybe we shouldn't wait. Vorduhan remained silent for a moment longer. Then he exhaled slowly. Yes, he said. Perhaps it is best. The Duke shifted, lowering his massive body to the ground before Cade. When he spoke again, his voice carried a different weight. Listen carefully, Vorduhan said. This is not knowledge given lightly among my kind. Chapter 70 Law 101. Vorduhan's ember-lit eyes locked onto Cade's. A law seed, the Duke began, is the beginning of understanding that which governs reality itself. Cade remained still, listening intently even as the essence inside him continued to move. It flowed through his channels in a steady, controlled loop, no longer something he needed to force. The thin boundary layer he had formed held firm, guiding the current as it circulated through him, brushing against his senses with a constant presence. Vorduhan continued. You have already learned that essence is the foundation of all things, he said. It is the base unit from which existence is formed. Life, stone, flame, water, all are expressions of essence. Cade nodded faintly. But essence alone is nearly formless. It is potential, Vorduhan said. What gives essence meaning, what gives it structure, direction, and purpose are the laws. The word carried such weight that even hearing it spoken aloud made something in Cade's mind tighten. The laws, Vorduhan continued, are the greater concepts that govern reality itself. They dictate how essence behaves and how it transforms. Cade's gaze drifted slightly, though his attention never left the Duke. Inside him, the essence continued its steady cycle. To cultivate essence, Vorduhan said, is to refine the body and mind. To strengthen oneself. And while essence is necessary, it alone is not enough. The true path to power lies in the laws. Silence settled between them for a moment. To understand them is to begin understanding reality itself, the Duke continued. To embody them is to align your existence with their principles. And to master them is to impose your will and change reality. Vorduan's gaze remained distant for a moment before settling on Cade once more. Tales passed down tortoise to tortoise claim that if one follows a law far enough, if one comprehends it fully, then one may surpass it. Cade frowned slightly. How do you surpass a fundamental law of reality? By pursuing it so completely, Vorduan said, that your will no longer moves in accordance with the law, but instead, it becomes the law. Vorduan's gaze darkened slightly, something heavier settling behind his eyes. Even the Grand Ancestor, Drax, he said, voice quieter now, never reached such a height. Cade stilled. When this realm was sealed from the multiverse, Vorduan continued, he stood at the peak of all who remained. And even then, he possessed only 2 law seeds. To speak of surpassing a law is to speak of something far beyond even him, something none in this realm have ever approached. The words lingered between them and Cade let out a quiet breath. These laws sound, he hesitated, familiar. Cade shifted slightly. Back in my world, there were stories and philosophies. About something called the Dao. Vorduan's head tilted faintly. I do not know this Dao, he said. But it would not surprise me if your world brushed against fragments of truth. The Duke fell silent for a brief moment, as if weighing how best to continue. A law seed, he finally said, is the first step. Cade's focus sharpened again. It is not mastery. It is not even true understanding, far from it, Vorduan said. It is the moment you touch upon a law. When your perception aligns with a fragment of its truth. As your understanding deepens, that seed will grow and it will sprout. Cade leaned forward slightly. And when it does, he asked. Your connection to that law strengthens, Vorduan said. Your ability to perceive it. To act in accordance with it. To shape essence through it. Cade considered the old tortoise's words. If that's the case, he said slowly, then wouldn't it make sense to create as many law seeds as possible? Vorduan chuckled. The sound was quieter this time, but no less amused. If you possessed infinite time, infinite resources, and infinite inspiration, he said, then yes. But you do not. None of us do. The Duke's gaze sharpened. Time is limited, he said. Resources even more so. And most importantly, so is space. Cade blinked. Space. Yes. Space in your soul. Cade stilled. So law seeds are formed in my soul, he repeated. Vorduan looked at him, faint light flickering in his ancient eyes. The frogs truly taught you nothing, he said. Where else would a law seed take root? You create the seed within your soul when you connect to the higher laws, and it is there that it will grow. Cade swallowed slightly. And there's limited space within the soul, he asked. Yes. Each being may only cultivate so many laws, Vorduan said. Each connection takes root. Takes space. Takes, part of you. Well, that complicates things. Vorduan continued. The laws one chooses to follow are deeply personal, he said. Among my kind, they are rarely shared. Cade glanced at him. You don't teach them. We teach the foundation, Vorduan said. Essence and control. But the laws, they are a path each must walk on their own. Cade considered the old tortoise's words. Then how do you know about your ancestors' laws, he asked. You mentioned Drax had 2 seeds. Vorduan inclined his head. That is different. How? Because Drax is not merely some ancestor, Vorduan said. He was the progenitor of our kind. And that matters because every ash tortoise is born with an instinctual understanding of him and of his path. Cade's eyes widened slightly. Wait, like just built in? Yes. So, do the frogs have the same thing, he asked. Vorduan nodded once. Yes, of their progenitor Syl. They carry her imprint just as we carry Drax's. Cade rubbed his chin slightly. Then why train, he asked. If you already know his path, why not just follow that? Vorduan chuckled again. You mistake knowledge for understanding, he said. Cade frowned. One may know 1,000 paths, Vorduan continued, and yet fail to walk their own. The words settled heavily. I teach, the Duke said, not to force a path, but to help each hatchling find their own way in the great cycle. Cade tilted his head slightly. So why do they all just end up following the path of desolation? The frogs have 3 paths that they follow, so why do the tortoises only follow one? Vorduan's gaze drifted, something distant flickering behind his eyes. He paused before he exhaled slowly. I do not know, he said. Perhaps it is our nature. Perhaps it is fate. Or, perhaps, it is the result of endless cycles spent cleansing creations the frogs leave behind. Cade's gaze drifted past Vorduin and unfocused as his thoughts turned inward. Back to Earth. To everything he thought he understood. Cultivation novels. Fantasy stories. Power systems built on neat, structured logic. Clear paths with defined stages. Characters who always seemed to know what to do next. He had consumed as much of it as he could. He analyzed it and enjoyed every moment spent in the escapist fantasy. And yet, how much of that actually mattered? When the initialization came, none of it had helped him survive. He'd been thrown into the wrong tutorial. Surrounded by people stronger than him. And he had been nothing. Coreless. Useless. A liability to the entire group. He had tried to ask questions. Tried to understand. But every time he reached out, every time he tried to bridge that gap, he had been shut down. Cade's jaw tightened slightly. At the time, he thought that was the problem. That if he just had the answers, if someone had explained things properly, he could have kept up. But now he wasn't so sure. Would it have actually helped? No, it wouldn't have. The answer settled with quiet certainty. Because understanding something in theory wasn't the same as living it. Wasn't the same as becoming it. Cade exhaled. He could be told about essence and the laws and how to gain power. But none of that would matter unless he walked his own path himself. Unless he understood his path. Not someone else's. At the same time, that didn't mean knowledge was useless. Far from it. Mentors mattered. Their guidance would matter. But he had to keep in mind that their truths were not his. Cade's gaze flicked briefly to Vorduin. He could learn from Vorduin he already had. He just needed to remember to take what was useful without blindly following someone else's teachings. Just because he could breathe their white flames didn't mean everything that worked for the ash tortoises would define his own path. That would be no different than before. Just another attempt to force himself into something he was never meant to be. Cade's expression steadied. He wouldn't discard what he learned. That would be wasteful. He would break it down. Strip it to its fundamentals. Take what remains useful and use it for his own purposes. Just like the ash tortoises do with essence. Cade shifted slightly, refocusing on Vorduin. Why are you teaching me? He asked. Vorduin didn't answer immediately. The ancient tortoise's gaze remained forward, distant for a moment before settling back onto Cade. I have reached the peak of my path within this realm, Vorduin said calmly. Peak, he echoed back. It has been many cycles since I have encountered anything my flames cannot reduce to pure essence, he continued. With few exceptions. The Ashen Emperor, Cade said. And First Elder Rowena of the Frogs, Vorduin confirmed. Cade absorbed that information for later. And, that's it, he asked. Yes. Refining essence strengthens the body, he said. But as I told you before, it is not enough. When I reached my limit, a choice remained. I could challenge the Ashen Emperor for his role in the cycle, or I could step back and teach the young. Cade's brows rose slightly. And why didn't you challenge the Ashen Emperor? Vorduin's gaze remained steady. I would lose. There was no hesitation. No pride or doubt tinged his voice. Just a calm certainty. So you didn't, Cade said. No, Vorduin continued, instead I chose to remain. To refine what I could. To guide the next generation. To continue walking my path, even if it no longer led upward, it is still my path. His gaze shifted slightly toward the distant ashen front, moving along without them. Cade studied him for a moment. There was no bitterness or regret in his voice. Just a calm acceptance of his own limitations. Vorduin's eyes snapped back to Cade. That is enough, he said abruptly. We have strayed off the path. The shift was so immediate that it caught Cade off guard. What? The flow of your essence has stabilized, yes. Cade stilled, turning his awareness inward. Yeah, he said after a moment. Vorduin nodded. Then you have reached the point where further discussion serves little purpose. Cade frowned slightly. Something about that felt incomplete. Like Vorduin had cut the conversation short intentionally. But he let it go. The old tortoise's reasons were his own. You have done well, the Duke said. Better than most hatchlings. Cade raised an eyebrow slightly at that. You have learned to circulate essence. To stabilize it. And to produce the flames of desolation. Cade nodded faintly. I believe you are ready for the next step. What's that? He asked. That thing Brahm did, the Ashen Vortex. Hope and excitement tinged his voice. Vorduin laughed again, deeply amused at Cade's words. You may learn quickly, Vorduin said. But not that quickly. No, you have learned the basics of how the path of desolation breaks down essence. Now you will need to learn the basics of our path's defense. Vorduin pushed himself upright, the ash around him shifted softly as he moved. Tell me, the Duke said, turning his gaze toward Cade. What is the greatest form of defense? Cade blinked. The question felt obvious. Too obvious. He frowned slightly, considering it anyway. This wasn't the kind of question Vorduin would ask without purpose. But still. What would a tortoise think? A shell, Cade said. Vorduin chuckled, deep and rumbling. A shell makes a mighty defense indeed, he agreed. Yet, well, Cade said, glancing down at his naked body, humans don't exactly grow those. Vorduin's ember-lit eyes studied him. That may be true, the Duke said. But I believe you can learn. Cade lost control of his expression. He could learn to grow a shell? His mind immediately flashed back to the shattered tortoise shell he had used in his fight against Brahm. It had been strong and reliable, but wielding one was very different from growing one. Besides, he wasn't even sure if he liked the idea of wielding a large, bulky shield. Vorduin made a low, rumbling sound. I see hesitation within you, he said. As I told you before, it is not my role to force you down my path. But I can show you what I know to help you find your own. Cade's expression eased slightly and he let out a deep exhale. Whatever Vorduin was about to teach him, he could adapt it and make it his own. Vorduin turned away from him. Then, the massive tortoise shook. The motion was sudden, forceful, and, if Cade was completely honest, a little bit silly. It reminded him of a dog shaking off water after going for a swim. But instead of droplets of water, fragments of his shell broke free. Dull grey pieces sloughed off, revealing Vorduin's pearlescent shell underneath. Fragments scattered across the ashen ground. Cade's eyes widened. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing, but recognition soon struck. Those fragments looked remarkably like the shell shield that shattered during his fight with Brahm. The realization settled in as more fragments fell away, collecting in a loose scatter around Vorduin's clawed feet. After a few moments, the old tortoise stilled. Ash drifted lazily through the air between them. Vorduin's gaze locked onto Cade. It is time, he said evenly, to return this shell to its rightful owner.